Here's Tony Reale.
We start with why college football got it right. Yeah. We start with the day college football died.
Somebody missing.
We start with Herb Street walking off the set. All right, Alabama in, Ohio State out. National panel, there's not a thing more I need to say. Battle lines are drawn. Pablo Torre, first to you. Go.
I will admit that as a lawmaking body, the only thing consistent about this committee is inconsistency. But this year, on this decision, they are absolutely correct because the foremost tiebreaker between two close teams has to be which team is actually better. And there happens to be a very useful proxy on that information, which is what does Las Vegas say, this impartial body that's reading the market, what do they say about this? And Ohio State would not be favored against Alabama. Alabama, according to Vegas, is about a 3 to 3.5 point favorite.
Hold on a second.
Ohio
So
State
you say Vegas should be the tiebreaker here? You think?
I'm saying that's
I always thought lines, if I can interrupt for 1 second, were set to kind of generate money on one team or the other, not for who was better, per se.
But I think it's worth noting that Alabama is the favorite in this entire field according to Las Vegas right now. That says something, even if you want to quibble with how these lines are actually arrived at.
Okay, so Pablo went to Vegas for his answer. Bill Plaschke, we'll go to you for our next
I've heard a lot of reasons for Alabama. Vegas bookmakers is not one of them, Pablo. That's ridiculous. Vegas, Tony's exactly right. Vegas does it based on who gets the most money, who can make them the most money. There's no question they got this dead wrong. I realize you have to use the eyeball test. You have to see, maybe you think Alabama's a better team, but then you have to look at some numbers. Ohio State beat 3 teams in the top 16. Alabama beat nobody. Somebody on this panel tell me, it's signature Alabama win. They had one signature big-time game, and they lost it. Auburn clocked them. Alabama, there's one reason Alabama's in this, and only one reason, and that's because they're Alabama. Because people think they like the pedigree, they like the background, they like the brand, they like the fact that Alabama played Clemson last year. They want them to play him again. They didn't want Ohio State to play Clemson. This is wrong. They need to get rid of conference championship games. If they don't matter, just get rid of them.
KB, you want to jump in here?
Absolutely. As the only card-carrying member of the Big Ten on this panel, I am not ashamed to say that the CFP folks got it right this time, Bill. Look, you can't put Ohio State in over Alabama. Ohio State gave up half 100 plus 5 to Iowa. And lost another game. The first membership in this new club of this Final Four is 1 loss, and they have 2. So they're out. And you can't take it away from Alabama, their schedule, and the fact that they lost 1 game this year against their rival in their rival's house at a time when their rival was arguably the hottest team in all the country. But I'm not taking anything. They got beat afterwards, but not that game.
Okay.
So you can't take anything away from this. I agree absolutely with Pablo that this time I think somehow, some way, the committee got it right. Now, just because it got it right doesn't mean that the process cannot be improved.
Good. And we'll get to that in a second. But I got 2 for Alabama, 1 for Ohio State. Bob Bryan, where are you?
I am not. I'm in the middle. I would not be objecting.
Well, that doesn't
way.
make for a good committee member.
No. I would. Alabama would beat Ohio State. That's my determinant. But I don't think that they're absent the people in Columbus and the people who root for Alabama. The rest of us should not have any reason for outrage or this is a terrible decision. It was a very close call, and it's going to be, as there always are close calls, and there will always be close calls. This is a year in which we had 9 teams vying for 4 spots. Some other year we might have 2 teams worthy and 2 that don't belong. But this year we had 9 for 4, and it just so happens that 4-5 was a close call, and they made a decision which I think, and Pablo's right about the Vegas thing, but not necessarily because it's Vegas, but because the ultimate determining factor where I on the committee would be, who do I think would win a game on a neutral field?
Yes.
And I think
I'm
that
glad
on a
you
neutral
guys
field,
asked that
Alabama
question.
would beat Ohio State.
Because there's a simple answer to that question. Why not have everybody play? And this is my own personal opinion here, but you guys say make it 8 teams in a playoff. Why not go bigger than that? Every single other NCAA sport has a tournament. FCS has a tournament, more than 8 teams. Nobody's ever complaining that we don't know who the best champion is. So let me ask you this. It didn't come down to conference championships again. It came down to losses. So Ohio State would have scheduled Mercer in their first game and not Oklahoma in their first game. They would have 1 loss, and then would they not be worthy to get in here? That's what it all comes down to me. Is this a flaw the committee can get past, Kevin Blackstone? You were alluding to it earlier.
Well, it's not a flaw that they can get past with that sort of system, because that means you're going to have to reduce games during the season. They're going to have to cut back on purses possibly, or you're going to have to ask college football players to play even more football games. I just don't know if you can do that, but maybe expanding it to 8 and chopping off one game, you might be able to do that. But I'm not.
Yes, they play more college football games. Pablo Torre, you want to address it?
Yeah, look, there is a mental block here, too, in terms of when these losses can happen. Because if Alabama lost in, several weeks ago, months ago, this wouldn't be the same discussion.
Bias,
we cover it like a horse race, yes. And for some reason, we penalize teams for losing later rather than earlier.
All right, you're talking about Vegas and you're talking about horse racing. Pablo's really going the degenerate route here. Plasky, last word.
The answer is right there. Just get rid of the conference championship games. Make that the first round of an 8-team playoff. I was at the Pac-12 conference championship. There was only 48,000 fans there. It didn't feel like it mattered because they did have no chance at the CFP. You got to make these either matter.
It didn't matter. The last 2 years, every year there's going to be a conference in the Power 5 that doesn't matter if you only have 4
So just make them part of the 18 playoff.
But consider this. Is UCF been in an 18 playoff? No, and they're an undefeated team who just put up 60 points in their last game, #1 offense in America.
You would have one slot for them.
I'm going bigger, guys. You guys don't want to go bigger with me. Fine. Here's a view. We'll move on. Let's talk Rob Gronkowski and how this was not an ejection. And in a season of fistfights, maybe the cheapest shot of the year. It was on purpose and after the whistle. Davis White in concussion protocol. Gronkowski apologized after the game. This afternoon, the league suspended him 1 game. Bob Bryan, 1 game right or not enough?
For the most part, we regard him as a lovable lunkhead, like Ron Potemkin in Goodbye Columbus, and laughable, oh, no, it's Gronk. But this time,
I'll take
he
your
was
word for that.
way over the line. This was an egregious and indefensible act, and yes, he should be suspended, and the only question is for how long. This is disturbing on multiple levels. Number one, he was not physically harmed by Tre'Davious White. He had no reason to inflict harm on him. He was upset with the referee. Number two, how can a man with the injury history of Rob Gronkowski willingly inflict harm on another human being when he is the one that has had the plays cut short over the years by these pipsqueak defensive backs going for his knees because they can't bring him down legitimately, and now he turns around and does something like this to a defenseless person that he has no personal grudge against or shouldn't, and that's indefensible. And one other thing, his lame apology, because all he should have said is, I lost my head. I don't know who that person was. I'm sorry about this. I regret this. I will make up for this. I'm sorry. Not, oh, and by the way, I was held and this and that and wah, and how long it's been going on, 7 years. That mitigates the apology and negates it useless. This is the worst thing he's ever done, and he absolutely deserves a minimum of 2 games.
Do we even need to go around the horn here? I think Bob just covered it. Minimum 2 games. That would include a game against Pittsburgh if you're the commissioner, Bob Ryan, giving 2 games. Pablo Torre, anything to add?
I mean, a little bit. I would absolutely agree that this warrants a multi-game suspension because in preparation for today's show, I watched a YouTube video entitled Vontae's Perfect's Dirtiest Plays. I looked up Ndamukong Suh's dirtiest plays. I looked up all of these guys, James Harrison, who we label as dirty players, and none of what they did, those guys I just mentioned, those names, I don't think they're worse than this individual play by Rob Gronkowski. The guy he's going for is, by definition, in the most defenseless position the human body can be in. There is a punch in boxing that is banned called the rabbit punch. It's the punch to the back of the head, bottom of the neck, base of the head. And the reason is because that's especially dangerous. This is as bad as you'll see in terms of plays like this.
Kevin Blackistone?
It warranted a flag that happened. It warranted ejection that did not happen. It warrants at least a game suspension, which should be coming. Absolutely. One's reputation should not work in one's favor or disfavor in this situation. The fact that we like Gronk shouldn't work in his favor. There's nothing that should work in his favor other than the fact that a guy was in an extremely vulnerable position, as everyone pointed out. He lost his cool for that moment. He's very fortunate that the injury was not any worse to the guy that was already down, and he just needs to take his medicine.
Plasky.
He willingly put a guy in concussion protocol. And Kevin, no, not 1 game, 2-game suspension. Cost him. He doesn't play against Pittsburgh. New England loses home field advantage in the postseason. That's what this has to cost him. This must cost him home field advantage in the postseason for it to be a fair suspension.
Bob, while we have you here and you're giving Patriot dissertations, Tom Brady yelling on the sidelines. We've seen it before from all players. We've seen it from him. I always wonder why he gets a pass sometimes and emotional wide receivers don't, but this particular episode, something or nothing.
I was thinking about Bill O'Brien and what he was thinking when he saw this. Every 6 years, Brady has to chastise the offensive coordinator. It's really not, I don't think, in the long run, big picture, it's nothing. It just, you know what shows?
Would you say because you have 5 Super Bowls, you can get away with this?
No, I'm saying it shows Tom Brady's human, which we really have doubts about sometimes, particularly with this crazy TB12 nonsense of his. So, I mean, that's all. If Josh McDaniel can handle it, then we shouldn't be upset.
And we'll move on. News that will surprise nobody. The Giants cleaned house today. Fired head coach Ben McAdoo and GM Jerry Reese. Some outlets reporting they're going to go back to Eli as starter. Pablo Torre, the Giants franchise is asking for a do-over. Are you giving it to them?
Well, on the one hand, I think it's perfectly ironic and lovely that the same logic Jerry Reese and Ben McAdoo used to bench Eli can be applied to them. They're just looking who else they have on the depth chart at head coach and GM. The season's lost. That's kind of perfect symmetry there. But in terms of the heartlessness of all of this, if you're a Giants fan looking at this ownership group and you're wondering to yourself, man, I hope there's a plan here. If Eli Manning ends up starting this Sunday against the Cowboys, that tells me there's far less of a plan than a devious ownership group might have been able to claim otherwise. Because if Eli is not the quarterback, not the future, if the GM is out and the head coach is out, the ownership group can kind of say, hey, we're turning the page on everybody and we were doing this to make ourselves not the #1 villain. Now it just seems, if Eli is starting, that reset button just indicates to everybody that they don't have any idea what they're doing.
KB, what are you seeing here?
What I'm seeing here is that the Giants were fearful of becoming the Knicks. They were becoming an NFL laughingstock, and they went out to save the day.
You think they saved the day?
Well, I think they did, absolutely, with the change of the coach. McAdoo had lost his team. He was a brunt of jokes everywhere. I think he even appeared on our Halloween special, so he won't be back on that. And as far as Jerry Reese, the ice had been melting under his feet for a few seasons now. He had a good long run there. The 2 Super Bowl rings are on his hands, so that's fine. But this is Mara stepping in and saying we need to clean this up. We need to get the Giants, which were always a fantastically well-run organization, back on track again.
And Bill and Bob, are you giving the Giants a do-over here?
No, I'm not. The Giants are old school sports royalty that's doubled. I don't trust them. They hired McAdoo 2 years ago and it didn't work out. You trust them to hire a new GM? I don't know.
And Bob?
All I can say is they had to do it now because if to keep McAdoo on now, dead man walking, that scenario would have been absolutely unpalatable and unworkable. So it had to happen now.
But they're saying it's not because of the Eli benching, which makes you wonder, well, why didn't they just get rid of him 3 weeks ago? And then we wouldn't have had this Eli sideshow and the consecutive game streak that none of you knew about. But then became a
None of this makes sense.
None of it makes sense. We're taking a break right here, buy or sell in 2 minutes.
Including Ohio State not being in it. That makes no sense.
I'm surprised you're not lobbying for USC, Bill. Where were you on that?
No, USC is not next.
All right.
What makes the perfect
Seahawks 24, Eagles 10. Here's the lateral from Russell Wilson mid-run. That was forward. That wasn't caught by the referees nor challenged by the Eagles. Between that and the Wentz fumble at the one that went out of the end zone ball game. Bill, did we learn more about Philly last night or Seattle?
I think we learned more about Seattle. We thought their defense was decimated, and they held the Eagles to their lowest point total of the season. They punched the ball out of Wentz's hands. They intercepted Wentz. And then Russell Wilson, oh my, MVP. He's got to be the leader in the MVP race right now, though.
He's your leader in the MVP race over
their
Brady?
entire offense.
Over
Brady
Wentz,
right
who we
now.
saw last night? Over Case Keenum?
Right
all right.
now, yeah.
Kevin Blackstone, how about you?
Well, I tell you what, they're 18-5 in December, this crew under Russell Wilson, so you knew that they were going to turn it up because it's December. This is what the Seahawks do, and they're overcoming their injuries. But I thought this really spoke more about the Eagles because the Eagles had chances to win in this game, but they turned the ball over. They had some bad penalties, and that's just stuff that they hadn't done in their great run this year.
Torrey?
Russell Wilson has 86% of the Seahawks yards from scrimmage, which is the record in the Super Bowl era. He has 29 of 30 offensive touchdowns. He's leading the league in fourth quarter passer rating. He's done all of these things.
Sounds like you're with Flash. He's the MVP.
I'm making Bill's argument for him.
He did the
Russell
research.
Wilson is the MVP.
Bob Bryan, how about you?
Pablo, what's your point? Now, anyway, seriously, folks, the Eagles were not going to go 15-1. They had a bad night at Black Rock in a place where a lot of people have had a bad night at Black Rock, and I think it tells us more. I'm giving them a pass. This is about the Seahawks, and as Arthur Miller and I like to say, attention must be paid about the Seahawks now. They're back in the discussion. They're back in the playoff hunt. They're back in they win more than a first-round hunt. They're back in giving people they're in the tough out derby already.
Philly's loss means the 1 seed in the NFC, the Vikings, a team attention should be paid. They won in Atlanta yesterday. You like stats? Case Keenum, 0 incompletions in the second half, and Xavier Rhodes held Julio Jones to 2 catches for the game. Kev, Vikings the best in the NFC?
You know what? Watching that game, you think so. They've got a 2-headed running game. As you just pointed out, Case Keenum is on fire. 18 for 18 down the middle of the field. That's unbelievable. And they've got a defense that is second to only 1 in the NFC. So I like them right now as the best
Pablo
team.
Torre?
Yeah, that Viking defense is for real. The Falcons, of course, were the best at third down conversions. They were 1 for 10 on third down against these Vikings. But Case Keenum, he's not the MVP, but he is one of the greatest quarterback stories I can imagine. We don't have guys crawl around like caterpillars in the league. 24 starts here and there, kind of mediocre. And now he's a butterfly superstar, which is beautiful, beautiful to watch.
Metamorphosis from Pablo
Oh, look at
Torre.
that metaphor. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Bob Ryan.
Well, the Vikings, what's not to like? The defense, we all agree, everyone in the world agrees, is a stellar defense. They didn't exactly blow anybody out with that score, but the fact is that Case Keenum is doing what you can minimally ask him to do, which is don't lose the game. If you're going to go 18 for 18 on top of it, so much the better. You don't have to go 18 for 18. 16 for 18 would have been okay, but the fact is that he's doing his job and week in and week out.
Go Flash.
This was the eye-opening victory for the Vikings. Everybody has to say this team is for real. First time the Falcons haven't scored a touchdown in 3 years. Lowest Falcons point yardage total in 5 years. They held this high-scoring team to nothing. The Vikings are there. They're for real.
Buy or sell 3, the onside kick Miami did up 24 yesterday in the fourth quarter. This was Adam Gase on his old team, Denver. Quote, Gase is a savage, said Bronco Emmanuel Sanders. Pablo, buy or sell the move?
I buy that the reason he's doing it is to get back at John Elway for something that happened in 2014-15, because everybody else seems to agree on that. But he did this with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I don't know where the line of sportsmanship starts and sort of taking every play as seriously as you can ends, right? Like, this seems like something you might do because there's 10 minutes left in the game.
Bob Ryan, you agree with that?
Yeah, there were three scores, 3 and 2-point conversions ahead. I don't know the rule book either. I lost my manual. Damn it, I can't find it. The one with the rules of football etiquette. But it sounds to me as if it's a bit of overkill.
Flashy, you?
Yeah, very, very much overkill. The Dolphins had lost 5 games in a row coming into this game. Can you blame him for doing anything to try to make sure to ensure that victory? I don't blame him for anything.
KB?
I sell this. This is a grudge move, and this is the kind of thing that comes back to haunt you, or even worse, one of your players engaged in the game. Don't like it at all.
Look at those scores today. Torre, blacks are enough for showdown.
Goodbye,
Flashy,
Columbus.
Ryan, time to look for that manual on etiquette. Showdown, 2 minutes. Kevin Blackistone, Pablo Torre, look at the AFC West standings. It's a spam casserole. The Chiefs, Andy Reid gave up play calling. Alex Smith played much better. They had a million flags late in this game. Marcus Peters ejected a flag and then ejected himself, even though he wasn't really ejected, and they lost to the Jets. KB, how do you stop a free fall like that?
I don't know what you do other than to go to a tarot card reader or somebody like that, or find a witch doctor someplace, because you've done everything you possibly can and you still lost. And now you got the Chargers coming up. You lose that, you're out of the playoffs.
I just want to Goodwill Hunting Alex Smith, man, for a second here. It's not your fault. It is not your fault. 366 yards, 4 touchdowns, a 70-yard run. Alex Smith, man, you are not the problem. You have never been the problem. And whatever problems get solved, that's someone else's job, not yours. It's not your fault. It is not.
This is all your fault, Pablo. How do you like them apples? Point, Stone, Showdown 2, the only time the Lions didn't implode in the last 50 years. Silverdome still standing versus the star of the weekend, Turf Guy. What was a bigger stadium fail, Pablo?
It was the quote-unquote implosion, because one of my crusades in this world is to stop calling controlled stadium demolitions implosions. Implosions are when external pressure overcomes internal pressure.
Right. The external pressure here leads to a mute. Go ahead, Kevin, please.
I don't know what he's saying. The building didn't come down. That's what happened. They tried to blow it up. We see stuff get blown up all the time, and it gets blown up. I've never seen an implosion that didn't happen. There are people who are engineers in this country who build things that fall down on their own without dynamite. So, of course, that's the bigger problem.
I think Pablo's whole show fell down on its own today. Point, game, FaceTime Blackistone.
You know what? From all the things that happened this weekend in the NFL, the one that stood out to me happened with the Cleveland Browns and Josh Gordon. There are some 20 million Americans in this country who suffer every day with some sort of substance addiction and trying to fight it and get back their lives. And you know who got theirs back at least for a day and hopefully for the rest of time is Josh Gordon yesterday. Came back to football for the first time in basically 3 years. 4 catches, 85 yards from a quarterback who probably should still be in college. Let's hope that he's back. He's got his problems that have been with him since middle school, to hear him tell it, with all sorts of substance abuse. Way to go, Josh Gordon.
So glad you spent the time on that, Kevin Black.